Hello, Michael. Welcome back to the Focus program.
Thank you.
Michael, as many of you know, is a professional engineer and a certified arborist who directs the village's public works department. You were on the Focus program about a year ago when we discussed how the village clears the roadways of snow and the science behind the choices made in that clearing. For those current listeners who missed that discussion, it's quite interesting and still available through the Focus link on the village website. Today, we're going to be discussing some topical fall issues, namely leaf collection and tree work. Shall we start with leaf collection?
Sure.
Michael, what village resources, people and vehicles are deployed in leaf collection?
So what the village does is we have a fleet of 3 to 4 trucks that we utilize to tow leaf loaders behind them. We have one leaf loader that's automated, which is operated by one driver. So it's one person on that truck. The other 3 trucks are basically a driver and 3 laborers who go with it. So it's a crew of 4 per truck. We typically, during our peak, have 3 vehicles out on the routes, and they split the village up equally amongst themselves. Right now, we currently have one automated truck out, so they just completed one run of the village yesterday. So it took about 2.5 days to complete the village right now with that one truck. But as far as manpower, at a certain point, it's all hands on deck. It's the entire highway department and parks department. So you're looking at about 12 people and 2 seasonal helpers who tag along.
What's your target for completing the leaf collection? Target date?
Our target date is typically before Christmas. There are code dates which are set up, but we continue as long as we have to go because, as you know, Mother Nature could throw us a curveball and that the target date now gets pushed back. So we try our best to stay on a rotation. We try our best to stay in a set timeline, and we'll adjust our pickup and our manpower accordingly. So right now we're 2.5 days out. That's going to get heavier as we go into next week. So that's going to go to 5 days out. Our goal is to stay within 12 days on pickup, 15 max. But we try to stay within 12 days on a rotation.
So every home should be passed by a truck every 12 days.
That is our goal, and have a pickup. Many homeowners will see a truck driving up and down the road and they'll say, hey, they didn't pick up my pile. That's right, because that truck's not doing your area. So they might be driving up and down the Betsy Brown, going to Argyle or to Rock Ridge, and they're coming in and out, in and out. So you're right. So homeowners may see that happen and need to understand they're not picking up your area.
Right. It's one of the useful things we can do here is to make sure people understand the system so they don't have unrealistic expectations.
So our system is that we post information on the website. So on the village's website is a updated Excel sheet that approximates when the next pickup is. It spells out when was your actual pickup. That pickup was for the entire road. So just remember that if they did 2 sides a day apart, it's going to be the second day of the pickup. That's when your road was completed. Right now it's out to a 5-day outlook, and we'll adjust that accordingly. So homeowners could go on there and revisit that and get an idea of when we're coming.
Okay. And once you've picked up the leaves, how do you dispose of them?
So the leaves go up to the village's compost site on what we call Upper Lincoln Avenue, which is just north of Belfair. And in back of the county airport runway, we have a 15-acre site, which is operated by a third-party company who takes our leaves and grinds them up into compost. And then those leaves are mixed in with dirt and other material, and it turns into either mulch, it turns either into compost, turns into topsoil, a number of products that then are used throughout the village and used off-site.
Okay. Now the village also picks up Christmas trees that are left at the curb. Where are these disposed of?
So Christmas trees are disposed of at the same location. highway guys do begin the Christmas tree pickup, obviously the next day after Christmas or shortly thereafter. So those are turned into mulch up at the compost site.
Okay. Now let me just return to leaf pickup a second, because your mention of the truck that only has the driver and an automated leaf pickup system reminded me of this story that I've heard several times, that people put inappropriate items in the leaf pile, and when the vacuuming system tries to pick them up, they do severe damage to it. How often does that occur, and is it more likely with the automated truck?
So we do have issues that pop up every once in a while. Years ago, there was an instance where there was a piece of steel, a railroad tie spike, about 12 inches long, about the size of my thumb, was in the leaf pile, and the vacuum was able to pick it up, and it actually damaged the impeller and the housing. These are very powerful machines. They're 80, 100 horsepower. They operate at high speeds, 1,800 to 2,500 RPMs. They have a lot of torque behind them. So if something tries to jam up, that engine is going to try to power through it. Okay. For the automated hook lift, yes, it's a little more dangerous because the driver is in the cab. He's looking at the funnel. So he's not out there with the rake. Like on the other trucks, you have two persons out there with the rake who are moving those leaf piles to the truck, and they could see if there's a pot, if there's something in there. The hook lift, unfortunately, the driver, he's looking out for debris, but it's hard. If there's something mixed in the middle and the funnel is on top, you can't see that. Last year, we had a catastrophic failure that cost us about $18,000 in damage to this truck. So we don't know what it was from. We never found a direct correlation with something, but that just goes to show you that if something happens, the extent of what the damage could potentially be on a piece of equipment. The vacuum alone is $100,000. So, they're not cheap items.
So that's actually a very expensive repair in a way. It seems to me.
It is, but the life of the equipment is easily 15 years when maintained. So to go out and buy another piece of equipment at $100,000 when it costs us 18 to fix it and everything else is in the good shape makes more sense at the moment.
Yeah. Any thoughts on how inappropriate items get into the leaf pile? Is it? I would assume we think it's not deliberate. It's just carelessness, or people don't know.
We feel sometimes, and not to point fingers, that's not what this is about, and it shouldn't be taken that way. We feel that sometimes things are placed on top of piles on purpose, like piles of branches, because it may be felt that, well, highway guys will come and remove the branches, so that means the leaf truck is going to come right behind it. It's not the case. The guy in the truck's not going to get out, move the leaf piles, and vacuum the pile. There are other times where you get items in a pile like pots. We don't know how they make their way into it. Even in our green waste pickup, when our sanitation company is out there on green waste, when they dump at the compost site, there's pots from mums, there's pots from plants. Those things should not be in there. Those things should be either thrown in the garbage or recycled if they're recyclable. So sometimes we feel it's accidental when they're blowing the leaves. There may be something there that they didn't realize, and it's an accident, which is fine. But sometimes we feel it's probably 80-20.
80% accident?
Accident, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's good though that we've talked about this, because I think people need to be aware that there's a need to be careful about these leaf piles and make sure it's really only leaves in them. Otherwise, because $18,000 in a village that has a population, keeping the number simple, of $9,000, 9,000 people, it's, $2 a person. It's not a lot, but nobody wants their taxes to go up.
That is correct, and that's why we try to maintain our equipment at peak operating efficiency. With an operating repair budget of $150,000, that's 10% or slightly higher of the budget. 13%. That's a big hit out of your year-long operating line. That's a lot of oil changes and the brake pads, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's little things like that, of course, add up, and not the people. And as I said, people don't want to pay more taxes, so here's a role they can play to help mitigate that.
Correct. Anything such as the tall grasses that people have at the end of their driveways, so things like that, any shrubs that they put out, those should be strictly out for green waste day. They should not be put on top of the leaf pile, because what we're finding is that even though the machines are powerful, when these tall grasses come in as a group, as a bunch, it's almost like you throwing a rope into the mix. Doesn't work very well.
Right.
So then we have to unclog the machine, turn it off, unclog it, take the hose off, or go down to the highway yard at the other end of the village, and now you just lost an hour of production.
Okay, well, we're on the leaf issue. The village has also taken steps to address global warming, perhaps most notably with the required switch to electric leaf and gas blowers. What steps has the Department of Public Works taken along these lines?
So Public Works and Parks actually purchased a number of leaf blowers, which are electric. We also purchased a few weed whackers, which are also electric and compatible. So we've taken the step moving forward to merge into the electric market, I will say. We're finding that there are some limitations with that equipment. Obviously, technology keeps changing. So, but we're being forward, we're being cautious at what we're buying. We're doing our research, we're doing our homework to make sure we're buying equipment that has multiple purposes. And what I mean by that is that the functionality of the batteries goes across 4, 5, 8 different pieces of equipment, not just one. So for instance, our leaf blower battery is a backpack battery. We have an adapter kit that is able to go on a hedge trimmer, on a chainsaw, on a weed whacker, any other handheld powered accessories could be run off of that battery. So we try to make sure we picked a brand that met those requirements, has availability to parts, is a name brand company, and has a reputation in the industry.
Are the electric powered equipment, is it about the same efficiency as the gasoline powered, or?
You can't compare efficiency because it's apples to oranges. Power wise, gasoline blowers have the most power output because the factor on gasoline is very high compared to what you're getting out of electric. But there's environmental issues there. Okay.
Right.
So it's always a trade-off on something. The electric are competitive. They're not as powerful. The biggest issue is they have a very finite runtime. And we're finding that the leaf blowers, backpack blowers, have a 45-minute runtime on high. Okay. So when you're throttling between low and medium, you could get an hour and a half, hour, 40 minutes plus. But if you're running 100% output on high, it's only 45 minutes. And we purchased high-speed chargers. Even with the high-speed chargers, it takes about 3 hours to charge that one battery.
Right.
Okay, compared to a standard charger, which takes anywhere from 4 to 6 hours.
So to work 3 hours consecutively, you would need about 4 batteries.
About 4 batteries, or have 2 batteries and a charging location, and bring the charger with you in the road.
Right.
An outlet, basically. So
okay.
So it's a dynamic shift, and as part of it, we have to learn how to operate differently. We have to think about planning. So it's a new dynamic in the world of public works. You know, it's no longer, hey, let's take 2.5 gallons of gas. I'll be back at 4 o'clock. Now it's, hey, I need 4 batteries, or I need to know where I could charge and rotate and plan your day a little differently.
Right, right. And this move to electrification, replacing gasoline motors, is probably just at the early stages, because the issue it's addressing with the warming of the climate doesn't appear to be abating.
It is in its infancy. I went to a conference recently with the American Public Works Association. And you're just now starting to see your name brand companies in the industry that are starting to now push larger equipment, larger devices like excavators, loaders, backhoes with electric. But they're coming with a different dynamic. Today, with today's technology, they're able to track the workload. And one of the seminars that I took was very intriguing because the argument for gas electric is, well, it doesn't last that long. That's right, it doesn't. But one manufacturer used their maintenance software, which was remote, to track the actual usage of a machine. And they were able to compile a database, let's say for a little mini excavator on a sewer job or a drain job, that the machine was only used for about 4.5 hours. Okay, but the normal layperson is thinking, okay, machine is running all day. Yeah, you're right, but it's not working. The good thing with the electric machine is you're not using it, it's not drawing down on power. So it's a different, it's almost a paradigm shift in the way you think. And you have to think differently, because when I saw that that information, it was very eye-opening to see that a machine was only used for 4 hours, and the claim on the battery life was, let's say, a 6-hour battery life. So you're well within your battery life. So it's a perception. There's a lot of factors in there. There's emotion. So you have to do your homework, and you have to be open to things.
Yeah, and I think one of the conclusions I draw from what you're saying, it's that as with the snow removal, there's a lot of science involved in what you do and how you do it. And it's really important that someone in your position, as you do, keeps up with what the thinking is in the field.
Yes, you're 100% right. There is a methodology. There is a way to doing things. There is a method behind the madness, I will say. And through the years, we've come to a point where we know our routes. We know more or less how long it takes. We know what truck will work in what area. And you plan accordingly if your fleet is down. You plan accordingly if your staff is down. The world of EV vehicles, whether it's plow trucks or smaller vehicles, factors into that, because now you have to think about that. You know, if I have to drive around the village during a storm, you don't realize sometimes that in a day or two, you can make 200-300 miles on a vehicle driving from homeowner to homeowner or from location to location. You don't realize the mileage sometimes. So now you got to be cognizant of that. Electric vehicles only getting either 180 to 250 miles. So now there's a new thing in the back of your head to monitor, to think, okay, well, now I have to come back. I have to plug in, and nobody goes to the gas station and starts to top off. Hey, I burned a gallon, I'm going to top off. Here it's going to be, I burned up a bar of power. Hey, I'm going to plug in to stay at 90%. So it's a different thought process.
Right. I'm sure it means you plan your routes a little differently too, to try to save the mileage.
We
to the extent you
currently
can.
have electric vehicles in our fleet. We are looking into them. The technology is not there yet for the larger trucks, larger equipment. There's no plow trucks on the market that could plow and salt. So for us, we need a multi-purpose vehicle. We can't just get a vehicle that could salt and then I have to have another truck to plow. So we're very cautious with that. I've been in communication with a few name brand manufacturers, and it's coming, but it's in the infancy stage.
Right. And I guess one of the leading manufacturers, which is a smallish private company, I believe, has really not had a lot of success with bigger trucks.
No, and people will say, well, it works on smaller cars. 100% right. Trucks operate differently. When you're driving a vehicle with an electric motor, it's just driving and pushing that vehicle and the passengers. When we have a plow truck, let's say for an example, that's carrying 20 tons of salt on the back, has a salter, has a 2,000-pound plow on the front, plus the weight of the vehicle, your dynamics are different because now you're pushing 10, 20 tons of salt in the front. You're carrying 20 tons in the back. The forces on the truck are different than if you're just driving that vehicle around the village.
Right.
You know, so that's the biggest hurdle. The other hurdle is the voltages. For example, a lot of these larger trucks are 800-volt batteries and electrical equipment. Nobody makes an 800-volt electric salter, you know. So it's all evolving.
It's as you say, it's a work in progress because it's evolving.
We're cautious about just jumping in just for jumping in. I'm not against it. I'm all for being a guinea pig and trying things out, but I got to do it fiscally responsible to the residents and the village. And I can't justify buying something that's going to cost $800,000 that may be only used for one purpose. So we're keeping an eye on the market.
And the physics problem is the weight of these trucks and the material on them. That it requires a lot of energy to move that weight.
Right.
Okay, well, let's once again, I mean, it's interesting to know how much someone like yourself and others need to understand about the science of what's being proposed in order to make good recommendations to the village about what can be done with.
Correct.
So I think that's worth pointing out.
Thank you.
Let's move on to the tree work. This is I think an area that people aren't entirely clear on. So for what trees will the village take the responsibility of trimming and or removing? And how are the village's efforts in this distinguished from Con Edison, say?
So the village is responsible for trees and utilities which are within what's called the right-of-way, ROW. The right-of-way is basically a strip of property from the edge of the curb, approximately 15 to 20 feet back onto one's front lawn or rear yard, depending if you back up onto a road, you'll have two right-of-ways. And each right-of-way varies based on the width of the road or what the survey shows when the road was dedicated. So it's not a generic answer that, well, the general rule of thumb is 5 feet. There is no such thing. So it varies by road, and when we get a complaint about a tree that's dead or diseased, we actually drive out there, we pull a survey, and we check the property lines to make sure whether it's the villages or the homeowners. Because it's honestly on a case-by-case basis. You could see sometimes in certain areas of the village where the trees were planted in a row, and you could look for obvious signs where all the fences end or where the stone walls are. You could try and judge something in an emergency, but generally we only maintain the trees within that right away. One question we get is with regards to Con Edison overhead wires that come into a house, okay, which is the house service. The village does not trim away from the house service. It's something that we just cannot maintain and do, unfortunately. That's not a service that we offer. Con Edison, in regards, has multiple programs, and right now they have a tree clearing program where residents may call and have a tree in the front yard evaluated, and Con Edison may pay for the removal of that tree if it's going to impact the primary wires or major infrastructure. It's a pilot program that they started about a year or two ago in Westchester. They've done some of that here in the village. So I urge residents, if you have a dead tree on your property and you have primary wires, heavy cables in front of your house, it might be worth giving Con Ed a call, asking them to come out and see if they'd be able to participate in that program. Con Edison will trim any tree within a certain range of their wires. So they'll go with 10 feet underneath the wires. They'll go with 10 feet on either side of the wires, and they will trim 15 feet above any of their wires.
Oh, okay. Switching topics a little bit, you were interviewed in the Westmore News and they published the interview in their September 22nd issue. And you were discussing this spotted lanternfly. What threat does the spotted lanternfly pose?
Obviously, spotted lanternfly is not a native insect to the United States. It came here from Asia, and it has exploded just in sheer mass. About a year ago, there were about 8 counties that had it between New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And today we're at about 24 or more counties that have spotted lanternfly. The biggest fear that is out there with spotted lanternfly is what it will do to the fruit crops. There's a lot of fear that it will attack the grapevines up in the wineries.
Mhm.
It has an appetite for multiple trees, and that's the concerning part. Unlike the emerald ash borer that just targets ash trees, the spotted lanternfly will attack maple, it will attack dogwoods, it will attack any of your fruit trees, your cherry trees, pears, plums. So it has a wide appetite as far as trees, and that's the concern with it, where in it eating the sap of the host plant, it could, in essence, kill that plant or basically deflower that plant or deleaf it.
Are there any external signs that the tree is under attack?
Excuse me. One of the telltale signs is if you're looking at a tree, it looks like it's all covered in soot, all blackish, almost like a charcoal dust on a tree. And that's an indication of the honeydew that the spotted lanternfly excretes, and it goes on the tree and causes the tree to turn black. The host tree for spotted lanternfly is the ailanthus tree. So we have a bunch of them. They're all over. They're another invasive tree that is out there that also just was able to just explode in population. But the telltale sign is basically when you walk up to a tree and you see hundreds of them on the bark, all massed up in a clump, or you could smell the honeydew. It's a very sweet, pungent, not very welcoming odor.
And so what is the village taking any, does the village have a plan to address this, or have they taken any steps?
As an arborist, I'm in the consultation with the DEC. I'm in the contact with the New York State Forestry Office and other federal agencies. At the moment, we do not use any insecticides to treat for spotted lanternfly. They don't seem to be doing the widespread damage so far that I could see here in the village. They are affecting some trees, but not to the point where, like the emerald ash borer, is just killing groves of trees. Now, the DEC actually recommends not eliminating all of the ailanthus trees, which are the host tree for spotted lanternfly, because there's high concern that if you eliminate the host tree, that the insect's going to adapt to other trees, and that there's going to be a transition from ailanthus to maples or to some other species of tree, and now you just change the dynamics of the ecology by making the insect adapt. Residents are urged to kill them if they see them. They're urged to vacuum them up and dispose of them. At this point, they're plant hoppers, so they're very quick and they hop around. So that's what's making their explosion so easy, is that they're able to just jump and fly from plant to plant to plant. So that's what's making it uncontrollable. So it depends on the approach, but there are insecticides that could be used to potentially control the massing of them.
And I understand the county has purchased a number of large vacuum devices so that if it spots a colony or nest, whatever the right proper word is, it can come and vacuum it away.
The county, my understanding, I did get a communication from the county where they did purchase about a dozen backpack of vacuums. You're correct, and they were willing to loan them to municipalities to go around and vacuum them up. Um, for the most part, our Ailanthus colony is spread out. It's not a grove of trees. They tend to grow in a grouping because they're invasive,
Hmm.
but we don't have entire tracts of land that have 20 Ailanthus trees on them. You'll have one tree here, 4 trees there, 2 trees here. So it's a little hard to just drive around the village and go and vacuum these things up because once again, we're only able to do work on village right away and village property. So we can't go into someone's backyard to vacuum up a lanternfly colony. That's why homeowners are urged to, if you have a shop vac, vacuum them up, please,
Okay.
or kill them.
And I also read that this is the time of year when the lanternflies are laying eggs. And so there'll be I guess the word is sacks, big sacks of eggs created on a tree or near a tree. And that this is the time really, if you want to control the population, to get the vacuuming done. So,
That is correct because these egg sacs, and I'm not in my office, so I apologize. I can't show you on the computer, but there are egg sacs, and you'll see them on the side of a tree. The issue with spotted lanternfly is it will lay egg sacs anywhere,
hmm,
tires, barbecue grills, under your deck, handrails. So they'll lay these eggs anywhere, and that's the problem with it. But homeowners are urged if you see a pocket of dry dirt on a tree, take a brush, take a stick, and break it up and dispose of it. I mean, because these larvae will overwinter, and then when it gets warmer outside again after winter, they'll just explode, and now you get your nymphs, and that's how you reproduce your colonies.
right. So in addition to the current advice for individuals to step on them when you see them on the ground, it's people, if they spot these egg sacs, ought to take action. And if it's too high up or something and they can't take action themselves, do they call the village? Or if it's on private property, there's not anything the village can do? How's that?
If it's on private property, the village really cannot do anything. We legally do not have authority to work on private property unless there's an easement in place for that purpose. However, residents would have to call a certified arborist, a tree company, call a exterminating company. There's a number of companies now that are doing preventative maintenance and treatments. There's things over the market, over the shelf on the market that people could buy at one of the big box locations. You have to be careful with those products with regards to using them in a wetland area, using them around other plants, killing off bees, for example, which are pollinators.
Right.
A lot of times the off-the-shelf items, their residual effects are just very low. So they're not commercial, um, you know, level where it stays in the sap of the tree under the bark and it's there.
Okay, there was another item you mentioned in that article in the Westmore News I'd like to follow up with. And it's also an issue rather, that you wrote an article about for, I think it was a Cornell newsletter. This has to do with bare root trees. And I'd honestly not heard the term before. So if you could tell people what they are and what their advantages are.
Sure. So about 10 years ago or more, the village considered other methods of replanting trees within the village. We have a planting fund. We have a planting program where we try to plant within the right of way every year. Manpower obviously available and the weather being cooperative. We try to plant anywhere from 1 dozen to 3 dozen trees along our right of ways. And early on, it was always go to the nursery, get a 2-inch tree that has a 4-foot ball on the bottom that's burlapped and planted. That's nice, but you need a backhoe to dig the hole 4 or 5 feet wide. You need a machine to lift this tree up and plant it in the ground. It's very heavy, it's cumbersome. And the success rate wasn't very good with those trees, and they're expensive. You know, our price back in the day was about $200 to $300 per tree. So as an arborist, I explored other avenues, and many municipalities have been planting what's called a bare root tree. And there's a handful of nurseries in the village, upstate primarily, that plant their trees in a sandy soil. And they're able to come in with the machine and lift them up. And then they dip them in what's called hydrogel to keep them from drying out. They put a plastic bag on them and they send them anywhere they got to go. Basically, those trees are dormant. They have no leaves on them yet. And the biggest benefit is that your root mass is 4, 5, 6 times the size of the root mass that you would have in the bull and burlap tree from a nursery. And the benefit of that is that the smaller uptake roots, which are the fine roots, are intact and are able to start absorbing moisture and nutrients from the ground. Because the trees are dormant, they're able not to suffer from shock from being transplanted or being shipped. Their growth rate, depending on species, varies, but long term, the growth rate of those trees is about 2 to 3 times that of what we would have gotten from a nursery. There's a downside to this. The downside is that we buy these trees dormant. They have no leaves on them. So they look like a dead tree when you plant them. Depending on species, they're smaller in size. They're only 1.5 to 3 inches. Instead of being that big, they're that big. Instead of being 10, 12 feet tall, they're 5 to 8 feet tall. So people get upset when they see a small tree like that planted. But the benefit is they're easier to plant. We get a multitude of varieties and species of trees incorporated back into the village. We have a 95% success rate with these trees growing. We've had a couple die. We've had a couple be taken out by cars, which obviously who's going to win that battle? Okay, but overall, we've had a good 95% success rate. We're stretching the dollar. We're planting more species of trees back into the village, so that way we're not having a monoculture. That's what you're seeing a lot of now with these insects. You try not to build a monoculture where you get a blight. We've stopped planting a certain number of trees. We stopped planting purple plums. We've stopped planting cherry trees. We've stopped planting pear trees for reasons being that, A, they're overtime trees, that they would always snap in a storm or in a heavy wind, due to infection and bacteria. All the purple plums that were planted when I started here in 2005 have almost been removed right now. Because there's black knot on them and they're defoliated and they get these black burls on them. It's a fungal bacteria, airborne. You can't stop it. So 45 trees got removed last year. That's a pretty decent number for removal, you know, and that takes away money from trimming, away from the street lights, from stop signs. It takes away from the trimming everything up off a road. So the goal is to try to plant back something that's going to take off, that's going to be disease resistant, because I can now purchase different cultivars that may target a certain disease or a certain insect, like American elm. There's many hybrids of American elms that are more resistant to Asian longhorn beetle. You know, I've planted a couple of them. So, and I could also get these weird trees that we've never had before in the village, which are native as well, like a cottonwood. I only have 1 or 2 cottonwoods in the village, you know, so you could incorporate new species, and that's the greatest thing I think with bare root trees.
And they absorb water a lot, don't they, cottonwoods?
Yes, there's actually a program called iTree Tools from the USDA that homeowners could go online, and if they're curious, you can actually calculate the benefits of a tree based on its size and the distance from a house to see how much rainwater it captures, how much it transpires, how much carbon dioxide sequestered. It's pretty interesting to see what a tree can do either in 1 year or over its lifetime. It's eye-opening.
Right. Okay, well, I wonder, Michael, thank you very much, as usual, very insightful. And any final comments you would like to make?
Final comments are, if the residents have a question or have any concerns, to always feel free to call and email. We're not shy. We're always available. We may not respond the same day. Obviously, we're all busy, but we try to respond accordingly to people. So it's a two-way street. I'm not always on the road, so I may not see something. Homeowners are my eyes and ears, as well as the DPW staff and the parks staff. So I would urge homeowners, if you see something, say something. Never hurts.
Okay, good advice. Thank you very much.